Good morning for everyone. Congratulations for the panel. My question is for Justin Wang. I hear very well your advice for decrease the informality in the region. The question is about our country, Peru. We have two big problems. First, obviously, the big informality, 35%. But in another side, we have a terrible problem with the corruption. In this context, we have also the political instability. What are your advice in this context in Peru in this moment? Is possible apply your recommendation, your advices that we hear now in your exposition? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for all of the questions. I know there's many different issues that are being talked about here in Peru, but I think there are answers to the questions that you're looking for. And I think the first part of it goes back to one section of my presentation where I talked about policy actors. And in my case, I applied a very broad definition. So it's not just government officials, but as I mentioned, it's business support organizations, it's research institutes, it's business leaders. And I think one question we have to think about is, who are the people that are talking to businesses? And it's not always government. So if it's not government, who are the people that these informal enterprises want to build trust with? And so I think part of this really is thinking about knowledge transfer and thinking about where these support organizations, where business leaders, where they can pass down the knowledge that they have to help informal enterprises to formalize or to help a small business grow. And what we're seeing in Southeast Asia is examples of not just these organizations, but big conglomerates, ride-hailing apps and services. They will provide training for SMEs, for example. So I think in the Peruvian context, it's perfectly possible to find national champions, to find the right businesses, to find the right people. I think that the role that government can play is sort of as this coordinating body. So we know that resources are finite. We know that there are different budgets and different programs, and a lot of them have already been set. But I think one thing we can do is we can coordinate between these different programs and say, what are some of the best practices we're seeing in different sectors? So for example, AI is a really big topic right now. Is there a way to apply things like artificial technology to the farming industry, to a small business, to a small farmer, and to say, is there a way that we could use technology to, identify crop sensors, or can we use AI-driven data to know how much fertilizer we should be using or when to harvest crops? So I think there's so many ways, but the role that government can play is really as this coordinating body to bring these different actors together. And I think civil society can also play a big part of that. So whether you're a student in a university or you're active in your community or you're an official working on a different policy issue, there needs to be that coordination of this different knowledge that we're seeing. So I think in many APEC economies, and not just Peru, this is an issue that we're trying to address through our project about how do we get the right people in the room together. And once they do, they can better understand what their resources are, who the right people are to talk to, and then coordinate from there. So I completely empathize. I think there's a lot of different issues that are here in Peru, but I think that there's a larger role that civil society and business leaders in the private sector can also play in having that conversation with government to tell them where the priorities are, what they should be looking for. Because I think at the end of the day, it's really about who are talking to these businesses and who are listening to their issues. And I think there's different channels and voices that those issues can then be relayed back to the right people to send those messages to government, to send those messages to businesses, to say that this is what we need our training to do, or this is what we need in terms of making loans more, financially accessible. Just a few thoughts.